Welcome to another Maamar. We learned today Sholom Rov, Tafshalam Ches, Melukat Beis. This is being learned in the Mizgeres of Project Melukat, Lila Nishmas, our beloved Shiur Rabbi Wagner. The Maamar was said Motzei Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev, Shabbos Mevarchim Tevis, Tafshalam Ches, in the Rebbe's room. If you recall, Shmini Atzeres that year, the Rebbe suffered a terrible heart attack, and many of the Farbrengas following was actually broadcasted from the Rebbe's room. This one as well, therefore it's recorded. It's from Motzei Shabbos. The Maamar, the Nikud of the Maamar, very, very Geshmaka Maamar, the idea of how to learn Torah properly first and how through learning Torah properly we affect the world. And the Rebbe explains how indeed every person that learns Torah indeed has an effect and changes the world and makes a dir b'tachtonim. But if you want to take part and truly experience that dir b'tachtonim, if you want to experience the tainug, the pleasure that Hashem has in your avodah, for that you need to be a keli, for that you need to be a edel yid, you have to have the achana. The introduction of learning, of davening, of Eidas Tefillah, and being an Edel Yid with Yer Shamayim. So the Rebbe is going to speak about different levels in Bittul, the Bittul of Eved, and then Ben, and then the highest level where you literally feel and you are an extension of Hashem, therefore you feel the tainug that Hashem has in the purpose of creation being fulfilled. Let us jump right in. The first two Oasis, the Rebbe is going to recap the beer of the Frierdiker Rebbe in the Maamar, the same Divrei Maschil from Tashin Daled. So, Sholom, the pasuk says, an abundant of peace for those who love your Torah. The Frierdiker comes in the Maamar, this Divrei Maschil Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev. There's a Maamar Sholom Rav, which comes in connection with the Maamar Parshas Sholom, all in Tashin Daled. Ma'u inyan Sholom Rav. What is this idea of an abundant peace, a lot of peace? For this is understood, obviously there is regular peace. The Rebbe points out the way the Frierdiker refers to this regular peace is Sholom Ma'at, few peace, or a bit of peace, minute peace. The Sholom Rov, then there is, in contrast, there is also an abundance of peace. What are the two ideas here? That's the first question. Second question, what is the term here? Those who love your Torah. Torah seemingly is a intellectual subject. It's Hashem's wisdom. Even among the nations, this is a rational, this is a intellectual subject. Typically, when referring to wisdom, you say in a term of understanding, those who learn Torah, those who grasp Torah. Why are we using the term ava, love, towards a intellectual subject? He answers this with another diuk. Why does it say your Torah? And the answer is, indeed, when we talk about love in the context of Torah, we're not talking about it as an academic subject, but as the Eibishter which finds himself within Torah, and that's the Eibishter that you love. So the idea of Oivis Yeresecha is loving the Torah, but not just the rational side of Torah, but the Eibishter, the Aaron Sefer, this is in Torah, V'zeu Sholom Oivis Yeresecha, and this indeed, in connection with this love to Torah, to the Eibishter, that's where we say Sholom Rav, you accomplish a abundant amount of peace. Sholom Shnasa Delim Torah Stam, Usholim Stam, Sholomat. When a person learns Torah just as an academic subject, then he's learning Torah simply, and he brings a simple amount of peace into the world. On the other hand, the next step, when a person learns Torah and he understands and recognizes and finds the Eibishter within Torah, we learn Torah with love of Hashem. And then Rebbe adds in the brackets, and that therefore by extension, you're also going to love every single Jew in learning Torah. It's explained that Avos Yisrael is a vessel, it's an introduction to loving Hashem, truly loving Hashem. V'Hashem kol echad, to the extent they're literally the same, loving every Jew is loving Hashem. Nimshach shalom rav, shalom shalom stam, and through loving Hashem, that's how you bring an abundant amount of peace into the world. So that's the simple meaning here, where we ask two questions, what's the Sholom Rav, and what's the Oivis Yeresecha? And the answer is that depending on one and the other, when a person loves Torah Secha, your Torah, meaning you within Torah, that's when he brings not just any peace, but Sholom Rav into the world. Next is Vihine. In the Frierdiker Rebbe explains how indeed does a person obtain this level of loving your Torah. That you love the Torah, not just the intellectual, the rational side, but the giver, the Eibishter. Now the Frierdiker Rebbe continues to explain through a person first serving the Eibishter through tefillah, through prayer. Kabbalah says the primary avodah Hashem is the avodah of love. And this is connected to the general idea, the avodah of davening. A person's initiative, a person's goal in prayer is ultimately to reach true love of Hashem, that davening is the greatest introduction to learning Torah properly. Therefore, the lovers of Torah. But again, the lovers of the Eibusher within Torah. These are people that first have the introduction of Tefillah. Because through Tefillah, that's how you reach true Avos Hashem. Through that, you love Torah. You can love the Torah because of the giver of the Torah, the Eibusher. Canal. Therefore, we know about Abba Binyamin. He would daven right away as he woke up, and his learning would only come afterwards, because learning Torah comes as a extension, as a result, after a person first served the Eibusher through Tefillah. Obviously, they're two very different things. Learning Torah is more intellectual, davening is more emotional. Nevertheless, when a person has the pretext, the introduction of prayer, he's able to learn a whole new eifan. So then again, when you perfect your love to the Eibusher through davening, you see Avos Hashem in everything, and therefore when you learn Torah, you're not just learning it as another academic subject, but you're learning it actually to connect to the Eibusher within it. That's Ohev Yisrael. So that's the Friedrich Rebbe's Maamar, the Sholom Rav Ohev Yisrael, abundant amount of peace for the lovers of your Torah. And the Friedrich Rebbe explains, how does a person reach that Sholom Rav that comes through loving the Eibusher in Torah? It's through first davening, in other words, through having Yiras Shamayim, being a complete Yid, not just learning Torah for the Geschmack of the Seichel, but learning Torah because you know that the Eibusher is found within it. Now the Rebbe is going to take a step further and explain, Razal teach us the importance of Birchas HaTorah. We'll say the short idea outside, where obviously while a person is learning Torah, the main faculties a person is using is his mind to understand, and therefore when learning Torah, it's very difficult to focus on the nice in Torah. Therefore, Razal instituted something called Birchas HaTorah, where before you start learning Torah, you first say Ashanasol and Teresam is Chanad. In other words, you recognize that there is a nice in Torah, there is a giver. And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that a few times throughout the learning you make a break to be mizbein, to think about the fact that there's an Eibusher. So the idea of Birchas HaTorah is this idea of finding Hashem within Torah. So let's see this. And the Rebbe also takes it to the next step, according to Chassidus, the idea of bringing Hashem into Torah through learning Torah with the right perspective. So let's see. If you use the Maamar of the Sa'aretz, the Gemara says, the Pasuk says, why was Yerushalayim destroyed? Al Azva Mistirasi, because Jewish people forsaked, they abandoned Torah. And the Gemara explains, Al Shalei Bircha B'Torah Tchila, they didn't make the bracha before Torah. From this is understood, and we could put it in a question-answer form. The question obviously is, just because you didn't make a bracha in Torah doesn't mean you forsake Torah, but from this is understood, we move on, She'inin Baruch B'Torah Tchila, Hu Inin Ikri Lerak B'Avedis Al Nevechalal, V'Asher Deiz Shalei Baruch B'Tchila of the Aretz, Elagam B'Lim Ad Torah. It's not just, Birchas HaTorah is its own separate, very important avodah, because Jewish people were lacking the avodah called Birchas HaTorah, therefore the Eretz Yisrael was destroyed. Not just that, but it's an essential point in learning Torah. So it's not a separate avodah which is important, but it's a primary part of learning Torah. How do we know that? Very simply. Torah says, you forsake my Torah, and Razal teach that means you didn't make the bracha. That means not making the bracha means forsaking Torah. In other words, there's a connection here between the Birchas HaTorah and the actual Torah. But we're going to explain, that doesn't mean not learning. Forsaking Torah here doesn't mean a person sits back and wastes time. Here we see as well the same diuk as before. You forsake the Torah, the Eibusher within Torah. In other words, the Jewish people in the time of the Churban did learn Torah. They learned Torah for many, many hours. And therefore, the Birchas HaTorah was missing, the Torah was missing. Ozvas Torah means they were lacking the Eibusher, the true kavanah, the intent that's supposed to be within Torah. And therefore, they could have been learning a lot. They didn't leave Torah, but they left Torah. Hine. We're going to explain when a person makes a Birchas HaTorah first, he's actually opening a shefa. He's bringing a flow of bracha and a flow of Ein Sof, of Eibusher into Torah. Moving on, Birchas HaTorah, the L'cheira have the lemer Birchas Lifanel, Lifnei Limen HaTorah. Ma'u Birchas HaTorah. The Rebbe points out seemingly the lashon, the terminology should have been the reason why Yerushalayim was destroyed because he didn't make a bracha before learning Torah. Shalei Baruchu Lifnei Torah or Lifanel. The reason why it says Baruch Hu Bat Torah Tchila Ki Bracha Yimiloshin Hamshocha Maamar the Rebbe. The term in Mishnah says Hamavrich. Mavrich bracha can mean to implant, to plant, to bring, to funnel and to bring energy. To open the flow of Inid Zezir and the Tias Kela Mavrich the Rebbe Shach Miyuchal Lekan Keterim Yisrael Initial Zir Ba'aretz, and this is very much connected to our concept here, because Torah mitzvahs is the idea of sowing, of planting seeds of the Eibishter, of Ein Sof. So what does it mean, birchu b'Torah? What does it mean to implant, to draw and bring into Torah? That is the idea of bringing Ein Sof, bringing Ein Sof, Hashem Zeif in the light within Torah. This is also the idea that's explained in Chassidus. What does it mean to learn Torah Lishma? To learn Torah just for the Torah itself. What's the answer? Chassidus explains it's to enhance Torah, so to speak, to make Torah more than it is before you started learning it, and that's through bringing within Torah the Eibishter that's above Torah. Torah, when you just look at it at first glance, is Chachma, it's wisdom. When you can have the right perspective, you actually bring what's higher than Chachma into Torah. You bring Hashem's infinite light into Torah. Is brought down in Melukat Svarim that David would actually connect Torah with Hashem. What does it mean, connect Torah with Hashem? He brings Hashem, he reveals Hashem within Torah. And that summarizes al oz v'amitirasi al shalei baruch b'Torah tchila. That's where, as I'll say, they forsake my Torah. They didn't make a bracha first. When a person makes a bracha Torah, when a person has that perspective, recognizes and realizes the noisen Torah, realizes what Torah is all about, then you bring Hashem into Torah, you bring Hashem's Ein Sof into Torah. When a person fails to make the Berachas Torah, that's forsaken my Torah. So you're going to have the Torah the way it is on its own. You're going to be learning all the same sugyas, but you're not going to be bringing Hashem, being Mamshech Hashem into Torah, so you're forsaking my Torah. You might have the Torah, but not my Torah, not the Eibishter's Torah. The Rebbe is going to say in the next paragraph, but ultimately Torah is Hashem's Torah. Despite your avodah, despite your perspective, Torah is ultimately godly and it's holy. Hashem and His wisdom is one, like the Alter brings in Tanya. And therefore the Rebbe says this penetrates into halacha, that when a person is impure, he's still able to learn Torah. Torah will never receive impurity. Torah is compared in the pasuk to fire, just like fire will never receive tumah. Torah doesn't receive tumah, so you're going to ask, Torah, regardless of your intent, is godly, is Ein Sof, is Hashem. And the Rebbe is going to continue the brackets. It's obvious the person who is impure is not learning Torah the way David HaMelech was learning Torah, to connect Hashem with Torah. He's not shaykh to the avodah of Birchas Torah, which we already explained means to bring Hashem into Torah. Nevertheless, this impure person, his Torah is godly, and therefore his Torah is Eish. Eish is always elevating. Eish cannot be Makabel Tumah. So seemingly the question basically that I was asking here is ultimately, why do you need your perspective if Torah is godly nonetheless? Nevertheless, Rabbi answers here, you move on. The fact that Torah is godly and Ein Sof is hidden. There's Torah that you see within it, it's revelation, you see what it is. When you look at it, it's begoli. When a person learns Torah with the right outlook, he reveals within Torah, you could see that Torah is Hashem's Torah. And here, obviously, it's ultimately true, but it's not revealed, it's not seen. The whole point of saying the Berachas Torah is to be mamshich, is to be megale the Ein Sof within Torah. And here, it's there technically, but it's not revealed, so you're obviously missing a key point. So what the Rebbe basically added here is, when a person learns Torah properly, when a person remembers the Eibishter within Torah, makes the Birchas Torah, recognizes the Noisen Torah, he actually enhances Torah. He brings the Ein Sof, the Kedusha into Torah. And that's Azvas Torah, and that's also Oyeves Yersechel. Papiza Yuvan, the Rebbe says in his Dalid, that now the Rebbe is going to add, it's not just my perspective, but actually the way Torah is affected is different as well. The Rebbe is going to taichos. It's not just my perspective. When I learn it, I'm learning in a different way, and it'll affect me in a different way. Like the Rebbe says, when a person has introduction to tefillah, you become a lover of Torah. But it's not just about you. It is actually very important in the outcome of how Torah is going to be affected. And why? When a person has the perspective, when a person makes the bracha on Torah first, he actually brings in Sefer the Torah. Therefore, the person, who is the person who's able to bring Ein Sof, bring Hashem into Torah and enhance Torah, so to speak? it's Oyev Yisrael the people who have the Akdama, the introduction of Avos Tefillah. So again, Avos Tefillah doesn't just make you into Avos Yisrael, but it actually enhances the way you bring Hashem into Torah. How does that work? Why does the introduction of Avos Tefillah help the Elikus that you draw into Torah? Simple. How does a person open the way for Ein Sof? Is when he goes out of the way, when he's bittul, right? When a person puts himself aside, that's when he leaves room for the Ein Sof, for the infinite. And for a person to truly learn Torah with bittul, with humility, that's through first davening. When a person davens, he stands like a servant in front of his master, which is a greater bittul even than Kriyashma when you pronounce Hashem Echad. Why? Like we see in Halacha, during Kriyashma, Halacha says you're not allowed to make any sign to another person with your eyes, with your lips, with your fingers. Nevertheless, according to Halacha, there are certain circumstances when a person can make a hefsek in Kriyashma, in Shemoneh Esrei, when a person davens. Even those are prohibited. Therefore, you see a greater bittul in davening Shemoneh Esrei. Therefore, Kriyashma, a person sits. Primarily, it can be done sitting as well. Davening needs to be done standing. Shemoneh Esrei to the extent that literally the word Amida already means tefillah. In other words, the concept of standing is synonymous with the concept of prayer. What's the difference between sitting and prayer, between Kriyashma and tefillah? So a person sits, a person settled. It shows also on your own tranquility, like he brings regarding Yaakov. Yaakov sits. What does that mean? He sits because Yaakov wanted to sit in harmony. A person just sitting down already means he sits down, he finds himself, he's comfortable with himself. So Kriyashma can be done sitting because Kriyashma is a lower level of bittul. On the other hand, when a person needs to stand, Shemoneh Esrei, that shows on complete surrender. So when a person davens properly, then the learning Torah as well is in a way of bittul, and then you're able to draw and bring in Seif into Torah. A person's introduction of tefillah doesn't just help that he becomes the Oyev of Torah, but his drawing Hashem into Torah, the learning Torah, l'shem Torah atzma, learning Torah l'shma, like we mentioned, as well is enhanced. But that can also connect. There are two pirushim. The Zohar explains, the Medrash says, there was a sulov mutavartzav reishim yashamayma. In other words, in Yaakov's dream, there was a ladder. The ladder began down here in this world and went up to heaven. Pirush Aleph, the first pirush Sulam Zah Kevesh, Tefillah, Pirush Beis Sulam Zah Sinai Torah. The two pirushim, either this ladder refers to Tefillah, a person climbs the levels of prayer as we begin, Hoidu, Baruch Shamar, Yishtabach, and Shemoneh Esrei, Kirshma Shemoneh Esrei. And then there's another pirush is Torah, you climb the lungs, you climb the levels of Torah. And the question becomes, obviously, how do you find these two different meanings within the same pasuk? And the answer is, when a person has a proper prayer, a proper davening, a proper bittul, his Torah is in a completely transformed oifen. If your Torah is not just another academic subject, but you actually bring Hashem into Torah, Kumteis Tefillah and Torah go very well together. And that's unique to Torah, because typically when you're learning just another academic subject, why would davening be an introduction? In other words, what's the connection? The way you prepare yourself to learn an academic subject is through preparing your mind, opening your mind. Here we're saying you're going to sit and work with your heart, work with your bittul, humiliation. Only Torah, which is godly, which is in Seif, for a person to understand Torah, for a person to see Torah in the right way, he needs the introduction of Yiras Shamayim, the introduction of Tefillah. The Rebbe is going to ask, ultimately, okay, so this pasuk, Sholom basically tells me you have Oivei Torah, Torah Secha, Dafka Hashem's Torah. The problem is, there's an earlier pasuk, which, by the way, this pasuk was discussed in the Maamar, V'chol B'naich. And there, it doesn't stress the idea of Torah Secha, Dafka, and nevertheless, it says the idea of Sholom Rav. So the Rebbe is going to ask, the two psukim are brought one after the other. First, Chol B'naich, and then Sholom Rav. You must say, according to what we just explained, that also the B'naich, the children who learn Torah, is also after the introduction of Tefillah. Why? Our pasuk, how do we know means Hashem's Torah? From the diuk of the Tov, Teresecha, but as well from Sholom Rav. So here it says Rav Sholom, which is the same idea. obviously they also have the Akdamas that fills. The question is basically you have the same message twice here. In our Maamar we explain you only reach Rav Sholem, the abundant peace, when you love Torah. So obviously the Rav Sholem from the earlier pasuk also we're speaking about people who have the introduction of tefillah. So what's the chiddush in our pasuk? What the Rebbe is basically going to tell us is not necessarily. Not necessarily. You could have Rav Sholem without tefillah, and that's going to be the first pasuk, and you have Sholem Rav in our pasuk, and that's through the introduction of tefillah. Two very different concepts. A beautiful idea. Let's get it right in there. And what the Rebbe is basically going to explain is just to bring Hashem, just to perfect the world, you don't necessarily need to learn Torah in such a great way. You don't need the perspective of Torah. You don't need the brichs of Torah. It's just if you want to get involved, if you want to experience this change you have in the world, if you want to experience Hashem's tainug in creation, in the tachlis, in the purpose of creation, then you need to have the Sholom Rav. But just to affect the world, also learning Torah regularly will suffice. Let's see. In this pasuk, the Razal teach us, don't read it literally, children, but read it the builders. Here we're referring to the Talmid נחum, the way they affect the world, the way they build the world. They are building the structure of creation. This all of a sudden becomes the key to understand the difference between the two psukim. The pasuk of Rav Sholem the first pasuk is clearly dealing with banoich. Banoich means builders. The way Talmidei Chachamim affect the world, the way they perfect the world. Through their learning, they build the world. The peace we're dealing with here is peace that is being brought into the world through their Torah. Because again, one of the objectives of Torah is here to bring peace into the world. So, through being a Talmid Chacham, through being a builder, you bring peace into the world. That's the first pasuk. Pasuk Shalom Rav Levi Sesecha. Now then, the second pasuk we're dealing with Moisif, we take it to the next level. In addition to affecting the world, the Shalom, the peace, the harmony is brought into the Talmid Chacham themselves in their own lives. Therefore, specifically here we say your tefillah, your Torah, because it comes through the introduction of being a Yid or Shemaim who davens. The Rebbe says to affect the world, to bring peace in the world, you don't necessarily need such a great level of learning Torah. You don't need tefillah before. If you want to bring peace into your own life, that's through that's only through the introduction to tefillah. And the Rebbe is going to explain in the next ois, in his vav, and Zayin, how this idea where Torah can affect the world even if a person doesn't necessarily have the proper perspective. Mashenkin, when a person wants to get involved and enjoy that peace, that's when he's going to need to have the Akdamas Tefillah. Let's see. Let's understand what exactly is going on here. Where do we indeed find this idea where tzaddikim, through them learning Torah, they are being mekayim, they're establishing the world, they're building the world, like we call them builders, right? Banoim. What is the idea here? There's an idea where the aim should create the world with 10 speeches. Those 10 speeches are connected to the 10 dibris. Again, at Matan Torah. It's a word to the Magid. The pasuk says 10, 10. The 10 are combined to the 10. The 10 are against the 10. The way Talmidei Chachamim bring peace into the world, the way Talmidei Chachamim establish the world, build the world, is through taking the Aseres HaDibris, which include all of Torah, which include literally every nuance of Torah that will be discovered at any point in history, and translate that into the Aser HaMamorish Sheben Nivra Ilam, translate that into that Hashem speech, basically bring Torah into the words that create our world. You're going to ask, why do I need Torah to, again, Torah was given 26 generations later, why do I need Torah to so to speak, complete the world, if the world was already created completely. Because ultimately, your avodah is to always increase and bring more and more into the world, more and more light. So through Torah, we can bring an abundance of peace, an abundance of light, extra light into the world. And in the next paragraph, the Rebbe can explain that Talmidei Chachamim, they're marbim shalom. In other words, in addition to the completion the world had at its creation, through Torah, we increase in the light in the world. That's why he's marbim again. The world was created complete. Therefore, there are issues, there are blemishes, there are sin in the world. That's not what Talmidei Chachamim are here for. Why? The purpose of Talmidei Chachamim is not to take the world and repair it, bring it back to how it was at creation. Why? The Rebbe is going to say, because in their world, there is no imperfection. Why? Because they're living in a reality which is a complete world, which is a perfect world. They don't live in a world where there is sin and there is imperfection. So the Talmidei Chachamim are marbim shalom ba'ilam. They're not here to do damage control. They're not here to repair sin. They're here to just increase and bring beauty and light into the world. Again, we had a question, seemingly Shalom Rav Shalom, it's the same idea here. We thought Shalom Rav only could be Shalom Rav when you have Oivus Yisach, but the Rebbe says no. You could be, the reason why it's called Shalom Rav is because you're being Marbe Shalom. The world is complete, but you're making it better. You're increasing. Which is similar to the abundance of peace which Mashiach comes. Because again, through learning Torah, they draw from the essence of the Eibusha that's higher than the source of Welt. What are they doing? They are perfecting the world. They are making the world a better place. Because they make the world a better place, they're bringing from Hashem's purpose, Hashem's will, Hashem's ratzon. They're bringing godliness, they're bringing light and love into the world. And that's marbim shalom ba'ilam. They're taking a world which is created complete and making it even better. To understand that in an even deeper oifin, the Rebbe says, Oizayin, so the Rebbe is going to tell here, I'm going to tell us here, it's not just, the world is created in a certain way, and we have a job to add more. It's specifically the Aseres HaDibros which were given by Matan Torah, which completely transforms the way you're able to create the world and change the world, right? In other words, up until the first 26 generations of our world, you were able to do mitzvahs, you were able to add light, but the Aseres HaDibros embodies the concept of endless, Ein Sof light that the Eibusha, so to speak, intervened and gave us the Torah, gave us the ability to change the world in a revolutionary way. So let's see. He's specifically emphasizing not just mitzvahs, not just good deeds, but that's the Dibros into Matan Torah. Because again, the way we establish the world is specifically through the mitzvahs that are done after Matan Torah. It took 26 generations until we're able to truly revolutionize and completely elevate the world in a new way. In other words, the concept of bringing light into the world already existed. Which again, the obvious, we're adding light to a world that was complete. So seemingly that's the same thing we're talking about. But no, ultimately their avodah was with their own ability, their own strength. They weren't commanded. Again, the avos were so sensitive. They were able to know exactly what Hashem wants without Hashem even telling it to them, which is beautiful, which is a great accomplishment, but it's not godly. Hashem never instructed it. A person could only reach his own source, and therefore the Nivraim were only able to be Nivraim. They were limited to being creation, and therefore they couldn't break through the boundaries, the confinements of creation. Like it's known, the way water works, water naturally will always rise to its source. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches us about a well which existed on a high mountain, which is 23 amas higher than the Beis Hamikdash. For the water in the Beis Hamikdash to rise, water will never rise higher than its own source. A human being can never reach higher than his own source. But this can't be compared to the mitzvahs we do today after Matan Torah. Why? Because today we have a godly energy. We're not a creation anymore, we are part of Creator. And therefore, when we say we increase peace in the world, we're not just talking about an added love, added peace, added light. We're talking about a completely new type of transformation. Even Adam Arishin, who was higher than the obvious, because he was dealing with a world which was perfect to the extent there wasn't even the sin, the imperfection of Eitz Hadas. This is pre-Eitz Hadas. And the avodah of Adam was obviously a be'ein aroich dike. It was incomparable to how the world was on its own. The way Adam Arishin is working with a perfect world is literally bedugma the Rebbe is similar to the avodah of to the extent that we literally compare Adam Arishin's avodah to our avodah today. He had the positive and the negative. He needed to serve. He needed to work in the garden as well as guard the garden, which is mitzvah same. It's to say to the extent we compare it to the 248 positive mitzvahs and the 365 negative mitzvahs. Nevertheless, ultimately, there was a gzeira. The Eibush had a decree. Spiritual and physical. The holiness, the world, the physical world didn't become holy. The spirituality was in its own realm, its own world. Physicality was its own realm, its own world. And therefore, obviously, Adam Arishin was able to bring tremendous light into the world, but ultimately it was only a aura. The world itself didn't change. When we do Avodah today, after Matan Torah, now the Gzeira, now this decree was split, was broken, because again, Hashem, who created the world, created the rules, is above the rules. He gives us the ability to break the rules, the boundaries between Gashmius and Ruchnius. Now we're able to bring down the essence of Hashem, not just a ray, not just a shine, an inspiration of Hashem, but Hashem himself. So now we understand even in a deeper Eifin. What do Talmidei Chachamim indeed accomplish? What is this Marbim Shalom Ba'ilam, this increase in peace in the world? Not just are we bringing beautiful light, like the Ovis. Not just are we bringing Gilead Seif that are higher than Sherish Elamis, which maybe can be compared to Adam Arishin, but more than that, Nimshach B'Ya'atzmus, the essence itself, the Eibush himself is brought to this world. Which is again the idea of Dir B'Tachtein, which we are accomplishing, which Avodas Adam does, making the Eibush feel comfortable here in this world. So what do we basically just explain? We elaborated to explain the first Maamar Zal. V'chol banayich lemudi Hashem v'rav shalom banayich. Talmidei Chachamim as well bring v'rav shalom. They are marbim shalom b'elim. They take a world which is already complete and increase and bring, and especially as a Matan Torah, where it's revolutionizing what a Yid is able to accomplish in this world. But ultimately, that is only the first pasuk. That is only Talmidei Chachamim and how they affect the world. And again, for that we explained you don't need Avodas Tefillah. Hine. Next step, the Rebbe says is ches. What indeed is v'rav shalom? The Eibush doesn't hold back schar of any creation. The shalom, the peace that Talmidei Chachamim create and spread in the world, they themselves get a taste of as well. They themselves, because again, the Eibush, so to speak, rewards the Talmid Chacham. You're not just going to, so to speak, be the worker, be the one to do the job, and then you're dismissed. No, the Eibush actually rewards you by experiencing the work you did. This nachas, this pleasure that we cause by the Eibush, by the fact that we literally fulfill his will, his taiva, to give him a dir b'tachtein, to give him a dwelling place here in this world. They will as well experience it. Talmidei Chachamim, the Jewish people who make the dir of Hashem, will experience that pleasure. This is way above the schar of Elam Haba, just a regular reward. How come? They're going to explain. What's Elam Haba? The Eibush is giving you a creation, the ability to have pleasure. You can't compare that. It's incomparable to the Eibush's pleasure. You can imagine a human being's pleasure is so limited, so confined in comparison to the Creator, which doesn't have any limitations to His pleasure. But therefore we say doing a mitzvah down here is way greater than Olam Haba, because doing a mitzvah down here is, like we explained, it's the Eibish's timing, it's Atzmus. Because again, doing avodah here in this world, Olam Haba is the Eibish's timing. Hello. So again, you would say there's my schar, there's my tainug, there's Olam Haba, which is limited, there's the Eibish's schar, which is unlimited. But the Rebbe says, because the Eibishter doesn't hold back schar of any creation, yumshach latzadikim she'asu nachas l'bayra gam b'chinas nachas l'bayra. So those who create nachas ruach, who create the dear pertaining for Hashem, they as well will experience this pleasure. Now the Rebbe is going to tell us, okay, so what indeed is the difference between the first Talmid Chacham and the next Talmid Chacham, the peace they bring into the world, and the schar that they receive, that they can experience it. For a person to be able to experience, to utilize, to appreciate the Nachas Ruach of Hashem, which is completely incomparable to the person, something completely above what you're able to feel, because again, it's Hashem's tainug, which is has zero limitations, zero definition. For this, a person, just the math, for a person to experience Ein Sof, unlimited pleasure from Hashem, he needs to be unlimited himself by basically removing any sort of limitation, any sort of yesh. He needs to be completely bottled, completely surrendered. Like Rizal will sometimes say, the face of Hashem is Rashbi. How come? Obviously Rashbi is not Hashem, but Rashbi was so bottled that you saw Hashem through Rashbi. When the pasuk says Hashem is in his glorious heichal and his edifice, Rabbi Shua bar Belazar b'knisha midasha the Kisrin, when Bishua bar Lazar was in the Beis Medrash of Kisrin, that's when you were literally able to see him, you would see Hashem. Through a yid being bottled, through a tzaddik being bottled, that's how you can experience and feel the tainug, the pleasure of Hashem. Because again, when you are surrendered to Hashem, Hashem's pleasure is your pleasure. Like a slave who, because he doesn't have his own self-identity, the pleasure of the master is the pleasure of the Eved. So what's the Rebbe basically saying here? For you to bring peace into the world, you need to learn Torah, you need to be a Talmid Chacham. Beautiful. You don't necessarily need the Achana of Avodas Tefillah. You don't necessarily need the perspective that, you're bringing Ur and Sefer to Torah. But for a person to truly experience that Nachas Ruach that the Eibishter has, for a person to experience the schar that Hashem gives to Talmid, for that tzaddik, to Talmid Chacham, for fulfilling his purpose, basically to let him in on Hashem's tainug, which is Ein Sof. For that you need bittul, for that you need achana avodas tefillah. Therefore, the first pasuk, it doesn't say that it needs to be oivei secha. It doesn't say you need to be, so to speak, bottled. It doesn't say you need to have avodas tefillah, because just to affect the world, it's enough just to learn Torah. The Rebbe is going to fear that right now. Therefore, the second pasuk says, Shalom Rav. You want to have Shalom Rav. You want to have Nachas Ruach. The Eibish's Nachas Ruach. You need to be completely bottled. You're not doing it for any self-benefit. You need to literally be Oyave Hashem. You're there for Hashem. All the Torah, all the mitzvahs you do is not for any self-benefit, not for a physical, and even not for any spiritual benefit you'll derive. Like the Rambam describes about Avraham Avinu, that he served the Eibishter out of love. Again, love for Hashem, no self-benefit, no motive, ulterior motive. Like we explained a few times already, that those are the people who come, their approach to Torah is after they have the bittul of tefillah. For a person to have the Sholom Rav, for a person to have the Nachas Ruach of Hashem, he needs to have Oivis Yersecha, he needs to have the Agdama of bittul, where your entire Mitzias is only an extension of Hashem's Mitzias, and therefore you are able to experience Hashem's pleasure. Now that I was going to go back and say, that's the reason why in the original pasuk we don't necessarily say it needs to be When we talk about Talmidei Chachamim being builders and affecting the world around them, we don't necessarily say they have to be Oyev Yisrael Avodas Tefillah. Why? The Rebbe says just to affect the world that you do. Even a person doesn't have complete Yiras Shamayim, a person doesn't have the introduction of Avodas Tefillah. It's possible for a person to learn Torah properly and indeed come with the right result, with the right halacha. When a person makes a correct psak, so he is bringing peace into the world, he is making that the world should be conducted in the right way, and especially when people actually go on and do that psak din, that he paskin. So again, you don't need the greatest Yiras Shamayim to paskin correctly, even though you do need Yiras Shamayim. Absolutely, we do say that there's definitely a level of Yiras Shamayim you need to paskin, but you don't need the Rav Sholom that we're talking about in the second pasuk. You don't need the Avodas Tefillah. You don't necessarily be a Chasidish Yid who learns Chassidus and does an Avodas Tefillah. If a person wants to be one of those Talmidei Chacham who actually experience Hashem's timing in creation, for that you need to be an extension of Hashem. You need to be a vessel. Davening first, then you are not you, you are an extension of Hashem, and therefore Hashem's pleasure could be experienced and felt by you. So the Rebbe basically just said is, we have the first pasuk and the second pasuk. To just affect the world, you don't necessarily need to be such a spiritual and holy person, but if you want to feel it, if you want to experience it, for that you need to have the achana of Avodas Tefillah, you need to be Oyev Yisrael. Test. Now that Rebbe is going to tell us, we just concluded in saying the definition we gave for a person who is an extension is a Eved. Now that Rebbe is going to say, next step, it's not just an Eved, but it can even be a Ben, a child. In Samach Vav, we explain Baruch the difference between a person who, there's a certain mile in Kabbalah Seil and being, surrendered to Hashem. There's a certain mile in a Ben who experiences and appreciates it, and seemingly a Talmud Chacham falls more into the category of Ben, like we do say V'chol Banayich. Let's see. It's not just surrendering. In other words, it's not enough just to be a person who is an Eved of Hashem, and then, wow, all of a sudden you can experience Hashem's pleasure. You need to also be a child, also be a son, also be a Talmud Chacham, meaning the Jewish people primarily are not just slaves of Hashem, not just servants, but we are actually children of Hashem. We have that close relationship. Therefore, again, the first pasuk talks about children. The second pasuk talks about Avodas Tefillah, being surrendered. But you have to remember, the second pasuk comes after the first pasuk. You need the introduction of a Talmud Chacham. You need the introduction of being a Ben, of being a person who truly relates on an intellectual, on an emotional level. Being a Ben, being a child, means to have the same language. The Eved, the second level, being surrendered, being batal, only comes after the first level, being a Ben, truly appreciating Torah. You're going to ask, okay, but ultimately we don't keep the Banaich children, we actually say it as Banaich builders, which is maybe more similar to Eved. When you say Al Tikra one thing, rather another thing, we're obviously not here to completely negate the first Pirush. Pirush is here to add another Pirush. So in other words, in addition to the simple meaning that you're a child, you're a son of Hashem, you appreciate Torah, you have a close connection, as well you affect the world around you, Banaich. And then you come to the next pasuk where when you are surrendered, like an Eved, you have Sai Ben, Sai Eved, then you're able to experience the schar, the tainug, the unlimited tainug, the ein soif that Hashem feels in fulfilling the purpose of creation. Yud. To explain this concept, the Rebbe is going to go on to Is Yud. The idea of Ben and Eved, let's connect it to our parsha. Yaakov settles in the land, Neguri Aviv. Now, what's going on over here? What's Yaakov's avodah exactly? So he explains, Alter Rebbe is explaining the difference between Torah and mitzvahs. When a person does a mitzvah, he is a Eved. Again, you are just fulfilling Hashem's will. You don't understand what you're doing. You don't know why you're doing it. But again, you're putting on tefillin. You're doing Hashem's will. That's an Eved. On the other hand, when you learn Torah, so now you're not doing Hashem's will, you are an extension of Hashem. You see the world the way Hashem sees it. You're learning Hashem's wisdom. Like Razal tell us, who are the sages? Who Who are the kings? Who are, so to speak, the Eibishter, the leaders that are the Rabban? When a person learns Torah with bittul, the Eibishter puts his own words in your mouth. To the extent you learn Torah in a proper way, it's not you speaking anymore, it's Hashem speaking through you. So that's mitzvahs, eved. Next step is banim, where you are literally an extension of Hashem. That's what we say. Rabbanan are the melech, are the Eibush, so to speak, because when a person learns Torah properly with bittul, you are an extension of Hashem. Therefore, when a Rav paskins halacha, it's like the Eibush himself is paskening it through him. So that's the difference between mitzvahs and Torah. In a mitzvah, you are doing Hashem's will. In Torah, you are an extension of Hashem. Hashem is speaking through your throat. The Alter Rebbe continues there. Yeshiv Yaakov means he settles. Be'eretz Meguri Avim, the land of Meguri. What does Meguri mean? So Meguri can mean the fear. V'gam Lashon Oitzer also means to gather. Kamoi brings examples from Mazal. Miguram leia peris. You have a basket. You have a basket that you gather. You assemble all types of fruits. And the Alter Rebbe says the two Pirushim go perfectly together. The fact that it's Yiras Shamayim, the fact that it's Oitzer, like it says, Yiras Hashem Yitzar, Yiras Hashem is an Oitzer. Chen Yirazal Oitzer Shamayim, right? Yiras Shamayim and Oitzer go together. Appears that Kosver have a Magid Balei Lula. You just kill the Magid is the one who points out how Oitzer is Oitzer Shamayim. And what is indeed the connection? He does continue to explain. Meguri also means to gather. So you have here how the two Pirushim come together, Oitzer and Yiras Shamayim, gathering and Yiras Shamayim. What does it mean that he had the Meguri, the Yiras Shamayim, as well as the gathering of Aviv as his father? When a person has the bittul, has the surrendering of Yira, he has anova, humility. And especially that Rebbe says Yirei Allah. Yirei Allah means, again, it's not selfish, it's just the Eibish's glory. Then you become a receptacle. Oitzer lagila dechachmila. When a person is batul, you become an oitzer. And that's the connection between the two Meguri. When you do your avodah, of when you are when you have fear of Hashem Meguri, that is when you become a keli, a oitzer legila dechachmila nikar aviv. So you are Meguri aviv. Now you become through the first Pirush Meguri, being fearful of Hashem. That's how you become a keli for the greatest revelations of Chachmei Kanal, Bittul. As I have asked in Rabbi Ficha, a person learns Torah properly with Bittul, that's when you become a keli, you become a vessel, you become a conduit for the Eibusher to place his own words in your mouth. Now, what the Rebbe is going to derive from this beer of the Alter Rebbe, this idea we're being bottled, being surrendered, is a keli for Meguri Aviv, right? The two Pirushim Meguri, either Yira and being a place where being a keli. So the observation here is Megurei Aviv. You are a keli for Chachmei that comes from Aviv, from a father. Like the Rav Magid, also the lashon is Yira, fear of your father in heaven. Move on. It's clear that we're not dealing here with just bittul of a eved, when you're just surrendering, you're doing mitzvahs, but we're dealing here with the bittul of a son, because again, Aviv, a father and son. The ben. A son is literally an extension of his father. The Eibishter, the Dvaravaya, shines through him. When a person is a child, then he's able to truly be surrendered. Your entire mitzias is the mitzias of the father. Like it's explained in Melukat that when we say we are called banim, it's not like a typical, like a physical son who after he separates from the father's mind, now he becomes separate. Here, down here in this world, you are not an extension of your father. Therefore, if you have a choice to return your own object or your father's lost item, you give back your own first, because again, ultimately, down in this world, we are a separate entity from our parents. And neshama comes from Hashem's moichin, but he's still included within Hashem's moichin, and therefore we are an extension of Hashem. We're still one within Hashem. We never separated. The bittul of ben in our case is even greater than the bittul of eved, even greater than surrendering your will. How come? It's not just that you're surrendering your will, but you're actually becoming an extension of Hashem. Therefore, the Eibishter's tiny becomes your tiny. So the Rebbe basically just added here, and it's Yud and it Aleph and the Beer of Alter Rebbe of Terer, where you see it's clear, it's not just mitzvahs where you're surrendering your will, but you're actually a child. A child in a sense, at least in the context of us and Hashem. When we are Hashem's child, it means we come from Hashem's mind, but we never separated. So we're one with Hashem, we're an extension of Hashem. Therefore, Hashem's tainug becomes our tainug. Now we come back to wrap up. These are the two pirushim, the two psukim here. First we say, we have the builders who build the world, the Talmidei Chachamim, and then we say Shalom Rav. The first step, the avodah of Talmidei Chachamim, which are called Banim, the children of Hashem, Banayich, Yikapir Shav Magid, Al Patzav Yeshak, Gurei Aviv, Shina Avodah B'chinas Banim, Kanal, Leger, V'lesem V'tzezak Rishon, Lachnis Alayis Alayla. Just like the Magid message tells us, a child, Migurei Aviv, the child of a father, his avodah is to, in other words, earlier we said, Igur means Oitzer Shir Shamayim. Here they were saying, like the avodah of the Magid, the avodah is to gather and to elevate all the nitzotzes. So what is the ben? What's Migurei Aviv? What are Talmidei Chacham here in this world to do? Make a der b'tachtonim, elevate the world. To gather the godly energy, the sparks that exist within everything in creation. Therefore, the pasuk does continue. It's Kanan. What's Kanan? Kanan is business. We're here in this world to inquire things, to take mundane things in this world and make it kinyan, elevate it, and make it part of Hashem's reality. To elevating its energy. Therefore, what's the continuation of the parsha? What are they doing in the dream? They are gathering. They are making stocks in their dream. This is all idea of elevating, of gathering, bringing things together, making oneness, taking a lot of different stocks and making it one, and bringing it to the tzaddik, of a tzaddik. Vayeishev Yaakov. Through that, Yaakov is settled. Through that, you find peace, you find harmony. First of all, obviously, there's the peace that Talmidei Chachamim create within the world around them. And here, when we talk about Shalva, we also refer to the peace Talmidei Chachamim inquire for themselves. Because again, the continuation of the Maamar is Shalom Rav, the second pasuk, that those Talmidei Chachamim who are so batal, they love Hashem, they see Hashem within Torah, they are an extension of Hashem, therefore they're able to enjoy the tainug, the appreciation Hashem has in creation, because again, they're surrendered, they leave room for the Ein Sof. Because he's Talmidei Chachamim, the Banim. Again, the Banim are the first pasuk, but the Rebbe says the Banim are the introduction to the second pasuk where you're completely bottled. These Banim are avadim as well. They are a ben, which is an extension. Lochin. Therefore, the nachas ruach that Hashem has, the boira, the unlimited nachas ruach, through being children of Hashem, we as well can experience that. And that's the second pasuk, a abundant of shalom, of peace for the lovers of Torah. When the Talmidei Chachamim are ohevi Torah, they love Hashem. Therefore, their whole avodah is because of that love, not for any selfish reason, not physical selfishness, not spiritual selfishness. Last, it's just to cause nachas ruach. Right? And they know that their schar is incomparable to Hashem's schar, and they're doing it for Hashem. They bittul zen nimshach lem begilui nachas through this bittul. They as well receive begilui in a revealed sense nachas ruach and the tiny, the pleasure of the Creator, which again is Ein Sof, which is unlimited because they put it themselves aside. They are no mitzias, they have no self-identity. The tainug becomes their own tainug. So what did Rebbe basically explain? We have two psukim. We have the first pasuk, which is Chol Banayich, which talks about the Talmidei Chachamim and how they affect the world around them. We have the second pasuk, which talks about Sholom Rav Laohvi, which means loving Hashem, finding Hashem within Torah. For the second category, you need to daven, you need to learn, you need to be a Yir Shemayim, you need to truly find Hashem, the Avos Hashem, everything is surrendered for Hashem. And what the Rebbe tells us here is, first of all, to affect the world around you, you don't necessarily need to be a Yir Shemayim. You don't necessarily need the Hagdama Beitas Tefillah in that way. If a person wants to get in on the schar, if a person wants to be included in Hashem, he needs to be not just the Eved, not just doing Hashem's work, but he needs to be a ben, he needs to be an extension of Hashem, he needs to be a person who has complete bittul through Avodas Tefillah, that's how he can, so to speak, be included in the tainug of Hashem in creation, just like it's Hashem's tainug, it's his tainug, because when you put yourself aside, you open yourself up to the Ein Sof, to the tainug aboida, which is obviously completely unlimited and can't be compared to any pleasure that we would have as finite people. May you each have a wonderful day.